It's July 2025, and once again, Donald Trump has stumbled headfirst into an economic disaster of his own making. And this time, the fallout isn't just ideological or political. It's material, tangible. It's metal and machinery and power grids and paychecks. It's tariffs, retaliation, and the unraveling of decades of North American cooperation, all sparked by a man who sees every handshake as a transaction and every ally as a threat. Let's break this down. In a move so reckless it stunned even his own advisors, Donald Trump used Section 232 of the 1962 Trade Expansion Act, a Cold War relic meant for missile parts and munitions, to justify slapping sweeping tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, copper, and even automobiles. And what was the justification? National security.
If you're done watching corrupt elites rig the system and leave you behind, subscribe now. If you want real talk, raw truth, and zero spin, this is your channel. If you're ready to fight back, hit that subscribe button and stand with us.
Yes, really. National security against Canada, our closest ally, our neighbor, and one of our biggest trading partners, suddenly treated like a hostile actor on the world stage because Trump wanted to puff out his chest before a rally in Michigan, because he thinks punishing foreign imports will win him union votes, because in his worldview, trade is a zero-sum game where someone always loses. Well, spoiler alert, this time, everyone's losing except Canada. It didn't take long for the backlash to begin. Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly stepped up to the podium, icy calm, and fired back with precision. No threats, just promises. Canada would retaliate, swiftly and strategically. She made it clear that unless Trump pulled back his tariffs by July 21st, Canada would unleash countermeasures that would strike at the heart of American industry: steel, electricity, lumber, and yes, autos. And if you think she's bluffing, you haven't been paying attention. Canada isn't just reacting, they're recalibrating. They're done playing the quiet neighbor. And this isn't some symbolic gesture either. Ontario is readying a 25% export fee on hydroelectric power to U.S. states. Power that keeps factories running in Michigan, New York, and Pennsylvania. This is targeted retaliation, designed to hit red states where it hurts most. Let's talk numbers. Since Trump's tariffs kicked in, U.S. automakers have reported $3.4 billion in additional costs due to metal price hikes. Aluminum and copper have surged by 29% and 24% respectively since April. Ford, GM, and Stellantis have halted major production lines. Not because they can't build, but because the input costs are now too high to turn profit. Over 40,000 workers in related supply chains, metal stamping, wiring, insulation, have been put on furlough or laid off. This is not some theoretical exercise in economic patriotism. This is real-world pain. This is layoffs in Ohio. This is factory floor shutdowns in Kentucky. This is small-town businesses collapsing under the weight of rising prices. And guess what else is collapsing? Cross-border trade. Traffic on the Ambassador Bridge has plummeted. Freight shipments are being rerouted or canceled. Airlines are cutting flights between major U.S. and Canadian cities. Duty-free stores are ghost towns. This is what it looks like when two of the most integrated economies on the planet start to unravel, all because Trump wanted a soundbite. But here's where the story gets even more infuriating. Canada is already adapting. They're not just slapping on tariffs and walking away. No, they're planning for the next phase. Canada is accelerating trade talks with the EU, Australia, Japan, and South Korea. They're shifting away from U.S.-centric trade, and they're doing it with a quiet, strategic focus that puts Trump's chaotic governance to shame. You know what Canada's also doing? They're diversifying their invoicing away from the U.S. dollar. Let that sink in. Every time another country moves away from the dollar, America loses a little bit of global financial influence. And Canada, yes, Canada, is leading that shift in North America. This isn't about beef between Trump and Trudeau. This is about a structural realignment of trade and power. This is what happens when allies get tired of being treated like enemies. And the markets? They're not impressed. Since the tariffs were announced, the U.S. stock market has shed $4 trillion in value. Treasury bond yields have risen because investors are nervous. The Federal Reserve's own projections show a 0.4% drop in real household income across the U.S. over the next 2 quarters. Why? Because tariffs don't just punish Canadian metal. They punish American wallets. You know those cars built with Canadian aluminum? They're now hundreds of dollars more expensive. Appliances, electrical wiring, beverage cans, roofing materials, all more expensive. And the costs? They're passed down directly to American consumers. And if you think this is just about big industry, think again. Small builders are reporting price surges in lumber and metals that are causing housing delays. Supermarkets are seeing packaging costs rise. Schools are having to reconsider supply contracts. This is a policy grenade, and the shrapnel is flying everywhere. Let's step back and ask, what exactly was the plan here? Did Trump think Canada would respond? Did he believe they'd just roll over and accept economic punishment? Or was this never about policy? Just another MAGA show, a cheap stunt for crowd? Because let's be clear, Canada didn't start this. They didn't pull out of agreements. They didn't disrupt supply chains. They didn't invoke Cold War laws to justify bad faith economic warfare. That was Trump. And now he's staring down the barrel of a full-blown trade war with our closest ally, all while U.S. industry burns. And where's the GOP? Where are the Republicans who claim to support small businesses, who scream about inflation and consumer costs? Silent, cowed, terrified of crossing the man who just detonated one of the most successful trade relationships in modern history. Let's talk about what's really at stake here. This isn't just Canada. This is a warning to the rest of the world. When the U.S. uses national security as a fig leaf of protectionism, when we slap tariffs on allies to score cheap political points, we lose credibility. We lose trust. We lose influence. And over time, we lose partners. If the White House doesn't pull back before July 21st, we're looking at a long-term fracture in North American trade. Canada's already building alternatives. The EU is watching. Asia is realigning. Every action has consequences, and right now, the U.S. is acting like a rogue trader in a global economy that depends on coordination, not chaos. The truth? Tariffs aren't strategy. They're desperation. They're the tools of leaders who can't negotiate, who can't plan, who can't lead. Trump isn't protecting American jobs. He's choking them out. He isn't boosting domestic industry. He's isolating it. And unless someone in that administration wakes up, we'll all be paying the price. So the question is this: will sanity prevail, or is this how it ends? With jobs lost, with markets rattled, with allies pushed away, with a North American economy built on cooperation, dismantled by a man too obsessed with optics to understand outcomes. The deadline is July 21st. Canada is ready. The world is watching. Let's see if Donald Trump can hear the alarm bells over the roar of his own ego. Because if he can't, the backfire won't just be economic. It'll be historic. Let's not sugarcoat it. What's happening right now is not just a policy failure. It's an international embarrassment. And the worst part? We've been here before. This isn't Trump's first tariff tantrum, but it might just be his most catastrophic. You remember 2018? That steel and aluminum tariff disaster that cost over 300,000 jobs and raised prices across the board? Guess what? We learned nothing. Or rather, Trump learned nothing. Because here we are again with the exact same playbook. Provoke an ally, disrupt the supply chain, pretend it's patriotic, and then watch the whole economy buckle. Except this time, Canada didn't wait. They saw the writing on the wall, and they moved fast. You think Canada's retaliatory threat to slap a hydropower export fee is just posturing? Think again. That's Ontario's power grid we're talking about, a major source of electricity for northern New York, Michigan, and parts of the Midwest. If those costs go up, U.S. factories will feel the pinch instantly. We're talking thousands of dollars in additional power costs per hour for high-consumption facilities. That means even more layoffs, canceled shifts, and price hikes passed on to American families. But it doesn't stop there. Canada's also floating a cap on softwood lumber exports. And if that happens, good luck trying to build anything affordable in the U.S. Housing starts crushed. Commercial builds delayed. Every contractor and developer in the country, will be scrambling for overpriced materials or canceling projects outright. So let's recap. Trump picks a fight with Canada. Canada responds with precision. And who pays? Not Trump. You do. You, the consumer. You, the worker. You, the parent trying to buy an affordable car. You, the homeowner trying to renovate your kitchen. You, the small business owner who suddenly can't afford the equipment you need. And still, MAGA politicians stand by this disaster like it's some brilliant long-game strategy. Like wrecking international trust is leadership. Like alienating our neighbors is strength. Let's talk about the auto industry, because this is where the damage gets personal. Modern car manufacturing is a binational ballet. American and Canadian plants swap parts constantly. A single vehicle might cross the border 7 to 8 times before it's finished. A wiring harness made in Ontario. A transmission assembled in Ohio. A chassis stamped in Windsor. It's an intricate dance of efficiency and cooperation. But you throw a 20% tariff on parts from Canada, the dance is over. Ford has already announced temporary shutdowns at its Dearborn facility. GM is scaling back production in Flint. Stellantis canceled the expansion of a hybrid assembly line in Detroit. Thousands of workers, union and non-union alike, are facing reduced hours, frozen wages, or outright pink slips. And here's the kicker. These aren't cheap labor factories overseas. These are American jobs. Jobs that were promised protection by the very man who's now putting them in jeopardy. Because tariffs don't rebuild industry. They don't reshore jobs. They don't fix trade imbalances. They're blunt weapons, used by politicians who don't understand the global economy and don't care who gets hurt as long as they can brag about being tough. And Trump? He brags. Oh, does he brag? While the markets tank and Main Street suffers, he's holding rallies, shouting about economic nationalism and how he's the only one brave enough to stand up to Canada. Canada, the country that sent firefighters to help battle wildfires in California. The country that opened its airports to rerouted American planes after September 11th. The country that has fought beside us in every major conflict for the past 100 years. But now they're the threat. Now they're the enemy. Because Trump needs someone to blame for an economy he doesn't know how to manage. Let's go deeper into the consumer angle. You think this is just an issue for car buyers or construction companies? Think again. These tariffs are blowing up across the economy like a chain reaction. Take beverage companies. They rely on aluminum for cans. With prices spiking, everything from soda to beer is getting more expensive. That's not economic security. That's taxing the middle class by stealth. How about electronics? Copper prices are surging. So the cost of electrical wiring, batteries, semiconductors, and household appliances? Up, and up again. And while big corporations may absorb some of those hikes, guess who won't? Your local electrician, your local hardware store, your neighborhood builder. They'll pass it on, not because they're greedy, but because they have no choice. The inputs cost more. The logistics are a mess. And the uncertainty? It's a knife to the throat of every small enterprise trying to plan 6 months ahead. Let's not forget the impact on American farmers. Again, because here's what no one in the MAGA orbit wants to admit. Canadian manufacturers buy a massive amount of U.S.-grown soybean, corn, and livestock feed. But if those factories shut down or cut production due to tariff pressures, that demand vanishes. So now you've got Midwest farmers, already on life support from the China trade war, getting hit again. Prices fall, export opportunities dry up, and the safety nets that were promised, non-existent. Oh, and here's a kicker you probably didn't hear in any White House briefing. Foreign direct investment is leaving. That's right, overseas investors, who once saw America as a reliable, rules-based place to do business, are pulling out. Why? Because if we're willing to throw our biggest ally under the bus with Cold War trade laws, what's stopping us from doing the same to Japan, to Germany, to South Korea? Global capital doesn't care about patriotic slogans. It cares about stability, predictability, and fair governance. And Trump is systematically destroying all three. So where does this leave us? With a crumbling supply chain, with declining consumer confidence, with a Fed warning of slow GDP growth, with credit rating agencies whispering about a downgrade if economic shocks persist, and with Canada quietly, strategically, realigning its entire trade network around us, locking in new deals, building new corridors, planning for a future where the U.S. is no longer the center of gravity. Can you blame them? Because if you're an ally and you get treated like an adversary long enough, eventually you start planning your future without the bully next door. The July 21st deadline is coming. Canada is standing firm. And Trump? Trump is tweeting and ranting and fundraising off of this trade war like it's some kind of reality show plot twist instead of a generational crisis. But let me tell you, the voters know, the workers know, the consumers know. And come November, if this chaos continues, the American people will have a choice. For more years of economic arson, or something else, something sane, something stable. Because it's not just about tariffs. It's about trust. Trust between nations. Trust between workers and their leaders. Trust in the future. And right now, that trust is broken. Not by our enemies, but by a president too reckless to protect what generations before him built. America needs partners, not propaganda. Strategy, not stunts. Because when you burn bridges with your neighbors, you don't become stronger. You become isolated. And in a global economy, isolation is extinction. So the countdown is on. July 21st. Will Trump blink? It's now July 21st. The deadline has passed. Trump didn't blink. He didn't pull back the tariffs. He didn't de-escalate. He didn't even send a negotiator. He did what he always does. Nothing. Except brag on Truth Social, lie about winning the trade war, and call Canada a hostile economic threat. Yes, Canada. And what happened next? Canada struck back, harder than anyone expected. At midnight, they unleashed a retaliatory tariff package targeting $18 billion worth of U.S. goods. Precision hits across agriculture, steel, electronics, and automotive components. They imposed a 25% export fee on hydropower sent to northern U.S. states. And most dramatically, they froze all lumber exports under emergency energy rationing regulations, citing U.S. hostility and the need to prioritize domestic resilience. What followed was a complete economic rupture. Freight corridors locked down. Auto part deliveries stalled mid-transit. Power grids in the Northeast began running emergency loads as Canadian energy was throttled. And across the U.S., from Buffalo to Boise, industries that had built their supply chains on trust and integration with Canada suddenly found themselves cut off. This isn't some academic debate over trade law. This is real life and real pain. By the end of the first week, more than 60,000 U.S. jobs were suspended, not lost, not fired, but frozen in corporate purgatory. Shift workers sent home. Assembly lines paused. Projects delayed. Deliveries canceled. GM issued a statement warning of permanent strategic consequences if the dispute wasn't resolved within 30 days. Construction companies in Texas and Georgia warned of price spikes up to 40% on framing lumber. Small appliance manufacturers in Ohio and Wisconsin announced furloughs, citing copper and aluminum input shortages due to retaliatory tariffs. And yet, Trump still ranted, still postured, still insisted that America is winning again. Winning what? A national inflation crisis? Because by week 2, consumer prices had surged another 1.4% across the board, with durable goods, home renovations, and imported electronics leading the spike. Retailers were forced to raise prices ahead of the back-to-school season, wiping out discounts and pushing low-income families to the brink. And the financial markets? Utterly rattled. The Dow fell 1,200 points in a single day. Wall Street analysts described the tariff war as a deliberate, politically motivated economic sabotage. One economist called it NAFTA in reverse, only this time it's self-inflicted. And through it all, Canada never once raised its voice. No rallies, no Twitter tirades, no insult diplomacy, just cold, calculated moves, grounded in law, leverage, and strategic clarity. Because unlike Trump's administration of chaos, Canada came prepared. They had contingency supply routes, diversified trade contracts, and international legal opinions ready to go. They have been quietly preparing for this moment since Trump first floated steel tariffs in his 2024 campaign. They knew that the America of 2025 was no longer a reliable trade partner, but a walking liability. So they hedged, and now they're winning, not because they want to fight, but because they outthought the bully. And what did America get out of this war? Tariffs on our friends, pain for our consumers, layoffs for our workers, and a trade reputation in ruins. Let's talk about what this has done to U.S. credibility around the world. In Brussels, EU negotiators walked out a transatlantic trade round, citing the deterioration of U.S. diplomatic posture with close allies. In Tokyo, Japanese officials warned their parliament that America could no longer be trusted to honor bilateral agreements and began accelerating economic talks with Canada and Australia. And in Beijing, Chinese officials reportedly laughed, not because they approve of Canada, but because they see the strategic gold mine of a Western Hemisphere at war with itself. While the U.S. bleeds credibility and economic strength, China is buying up discounted U.S. soybeans, filling aluminum orders Canada can't yet meet, and quietly locking in long-term mineral and copper contracts from desperate American suppliers. This is what happens when you have a president who mistakes bluster for strength and isolation for strategy. Trump has turned America into a global outcast, not through ideology, but through sheer incompetence. And who picks up the tab? You, the worker. You, the shopper. You, the contractor trying to finish a job that's now delayed by 3 weeks because your Canadian drywall didn't clear the border. But let's zoom out for a second, because this isn't just about trade. This is about how America treats its allies. Canada has been one of the United States' most faithful partners for over a century, through war, through peace, through global recession, through recovery. Our economies, our industries, our families intertwined. Yet when Trump needed a scapegoat, he didn't go after Beijing or Moscow. He went after Ottawa. Why? Because Canada is a safe target for political posturing. No military threat, no retaliation beyond economic tools, and a population that won't stoop to Trump's performative outrage. But just because they're polite doesn't mean they're weak. Canada didn't yell. They outmaneuvered. They shifted their focus to the EU. They struck a fast-track trade deal with Korea. They reopened negotiations with India and the UK. They even floated the idea of a North Atlantic post-dollar trade bloc that would settle major commodity transactions without using the US dollar. That's not just economic redirection. That's economic liberation. The world is learning that it can move on without us. And if we're not careful, they will. Because trust, once broken, doesn't come back with a press release. You want to talk about America first? Here's the truth. There is no America first if it means everyone else walks away. If our closest neighbors, our allies, our trade partners decide that we're too erratic to deal with, then America isn't first. It's alone. That's the real cost of Trump's tariffs. Not just jobs lost, not just prices up, but our standing in the world evaporating. And for what? So one man can hold a press conference and shout victory while the nation slips into recession? This isn't policy. This is delusion, and it has to end. There's still a path forward, but it's going to take something Trump is incapable of: humility. It will require immediate repeal of Section 232 tariffs against Canada, a bilateral working group to review and repair trade flow disruptions, federal aid for workers and industries harmed by this trade war, a full audit of White House trade decision-making under Trump's administration, and most importantly, a recommitment to North American economic integration. Because here's the hard truth. If we don't fix this, we lose the continent. We lose the competitive advantage of shared infrastructure. We lose the buying power of harmonized markets. We lose the political stability that comes from interdependence. And when we lose that, the world doesn't wait. It adapts, and we are left behind. So as Americans face empty factory floors, rising grocery bills, and postponed infrastructure projects, one question echoes louder than any Trump soundbite. Was it worth it? Was it worth breaking a 70-year trade alliance? Was it worth sacrificing your job for a bumper sticker slogan?